Y'all know what it is.
Ya no canto las coplas, ni duermo de tu lado.
Mexico is a mixture of a lot of things, a lot of colors, a lot of cultures, a lot of food, a lot of music. But Mexico, another part of Mexico, a big part of Mexico, is a Mexico that was here before us. Those people are nuestras madres, nuestros padres, nuestras abuelas y nuestros abuelos, nuestros ancestors, our ancestors. So that's why it was really important for me to record this session here.
And I miss you sometimes, but beyond you, I also see the flowers. I also see the caterpillars. Where everything here is alive. And thank you so much for being here in this beautiful place of Zacatitos in San Jose del Cabo, amongst the mountains, which is my favorite thing ever.
Playing gypsy jazz here at the old cemetery in Todos Santos.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. Today's special guest is Josh Rogosin. He is the producer and owner, I think, at Global Sound Concerts and Ghostlight Concerts. Welcome to the show. How are you, Josh?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Ryan and Mike.
Absolutely. Thrilled to death to have you. Calling in from Mexico, I think.
Yeah, that's right. My folks are down here in Baja, so I come for 4 months a year and help them out.
That's horrible. I would hate to go to Mexico.
Yeah, the weather's terrible. The beach is far. It's such a pain, let me tell you.
So our listeners probably don't know how important or who you actually are as far as in the audio world. And I'm a complete audio nerd. I've taken classes from you in the past. Josh is actually one of the former guys from NPR's Tiny Desk series. He's done hundreds of concerts, billions of plays on YouTube on his work. And he's one of my idols in the career. And I'm really happy to have you here and have this conversation. So thank you so much for making time for us.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Of course. Yeah, it was such a wonderful privilege to work on that show.
Yeah, well, and so maybe let's talk a little bit about, the earlier days are kind of getting started. I mean, how did you get your start in this? I mean, obviously, Tiny Desk is a big success, but I mean, there obviously had to be something that led up to that. So let's maybe talk a little bit about just sort of your career in general.
Yeah, it took me 15 years before I was doing my career full time as an audio producer, engineer, journalist, before I felt I was even ready to actually be able to create the sound design for what Tiny Desk is known for today. I started in theater, really, and writing songs as a kid in high school. And that's what kind of turned me on to audio production. I got a 4-track analog tape recorder and multi-tracked some of my own songs. And that's what made me think, okay, I'm going to college as opposed to studying theater, which I had done and loved. I'd performed in my parents' theater in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in rock and roll musicals. I decided to study broadcast and specifically audio production at Ithaca College. And when I graduated, I was sort of at this crossroads. Do I want to be an actor, or do I want to pursue this thing that I studied in school and that I also love? And I think I was a little bit cautious about entering the world of being a performer because it's so competitive and because it's like winning the lottery to be successful at that. I took what I consider to be a much safer path, and it's still extremely competitive and challenging to be a successful audio producer and engineer. But that led me to basically doing sound for theater, and I used to walk by NPR on my way to the Shakespeare Theater where I was mixing shows in Washington, D.C. And I used to listen to NPR on my way to college, and I decided to go in there. I said, I don't have the 5 years experience that broadcast recording technician requires, but I've been mixing shows for theater, and theater's just like, radio, except you can see the audience, and they needed extra hands on deck. They had 50 engineers at the time at NPR in Washington, D.C. I think it's down to about 20 these days. And I was basically summer relief. I started freelancing, and that's when I started realizing, oh my gosh, there's incredible opportunities doing broadcast audio engineering, specifically for public radio, because they were doing collaborations with National Geographic where I could actually travel the entire world telling people's stories through the medium that I have fallen in love with, sound. And so I did a lot of broadcast engineering, talking head, radio stuff, all things considered, morning edition, weekend edition, all those big public radio shows. And then I gallivanted across the world with National Geographic, co-produced with National Public Radio. I got to go to Greece leading up to the 2004 Olympics. Did a story about ancient athletics. We did a story in the Mekong River in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, about the giant freshwater catfish that lives there. And another story that I loved working on was voodoo rituals and festivals in Togo and Benin, West Africa. So it was a really wonderful experience that I had not planned on at all. It just happened to sort of work out that I ventured into this world of public broadcasting and storytelling through sound. And then, I left NPR. I went to Marketplace, which is another public radio show about the economy, produced out of Los Angeles by American Public Media. Then I took a job at WNYC's Studio 360, which is a show about arts and culture, which no longer exists. I took a job back at NPR producing a quiz show called Ask Me Another, and helped sound design and create the sonic identity of that. And then my very dear friend Kevin Waite, and my predecessor and my mentor, he had kicked Tiny Desk and NPR Music's audio prowess off, and he basically said, look, we've known each other for 15 years. We started at NPR together, and the only guy I can think of to do Tiny Desk besides me is you. What do you think about applying for the job? I'm going to leave. And he had been inviting me to South by Southwest, and we went to the Newport Folk Festival, and he really kind of taught me his ways of, he's the one who came up with, let's record all these musicians with a stereo shotgun mic. And then I kind of just took it from there and added a bunch of channels and supplemented what he had come up with, kind of like, let's get a band recording around one stereo shotgun mic. And I sort of augmented that to create the sound that we now know as the Tiny Desk concerts. So I did it for 10 years, and I'm now ready for my next chapter, creating 2 new shows, Global Sound Concerts and Ghostlight Concerts, and basically traveling the world, learning about people and places through music. So if Anthony Bourdain, had a music show, this would be it.
I love it. That's so awesome. And being able to pull on the knowledge that you gained from doing the Tiny Desk and travel around the world and find these unique musicians. I've heard some of the recordings that you've done, and they're phenomenal. They're just really well produced, and they sound amazing for being done out in the open.
Yeah, it's funny because just the notion of that global travel, I think, is so attractive to me. Like I really think that, you know, this concept is very cool. And I mean, you know, I don't get to travel National Geographic style, but in the bits I've traveled, you know, I spend a lot of time in Spain. I spend some time in Amsterdam and places like this. And that's like my favorite thing to do, is start scooping up the different bands and the different kinds of, you know, music and stuff from the area. And so I find that notion, you know, something that I just love. I think that's great. I mean, you don't know this about us, but like, I mean, I'm, you know, big music guy. We spent some time tour managing bands back in the olden days and stuff like that. Mike, professional DJ. Like, I mean, we're big music guys around here. And so this notion, or even just in my head, it's just pinging around this idea of traveling around the world and discovering music. I mean, what a cool way to learn about a culture or to learn about people, you know, is through, you know, the music they listen to.
It's literally my dream job. I had to create it and give it to myself, but this is the beginning. And, you know, I just started a Patreon account today. You know, I have to figure out eventually sponsors and all that fun stuff that comes with making a business and making this thing sustainable. But for the first time, I'm not scared. You know, I had a full-time regular position in public broadcasting for 25 years. Now it's kind of like now or never. I could have stayed at Tiny Desk very happily for another 10 years, but I wouldn't have had fulfilled or scratched all the other itches that I have. And I really wanted to create something else. You know, Tiny Desk exists. It's incredibly successful. Everybody loves it. My fingerprints are all over that show. And I think now it's time to, you know, grab onto something else to get my fingerprints all over.
Well, and it's cool too, just the notion of sort of, or I mean, like, you know, you mentioned being a journalist and spending time like that. Like, so your journalistic attitude, in addition to just sort of technical knowledge or ability in terms of capturing this music and you know, being competent from your experience in radio to give a proper interview and do these sorts of things. Like, I mean, it's just like all the pieces are falling into place for an idea like that to happen, right? I mean, we always talk about on this show the 10-year overnight success. I mean, you know, that's what this is. This is, you know, the idea that came together, but it's really a culmination of life's experiences.
100%. I would not have been ready to do the field recording stuff if I hadn't started in theater. Like, one trick that I learned in theater was, you know, clipping mics to foreheads so that your people always stay on mic no matter where they use your head. You see the little mic in the hairlines of the actors on stage. And I used that same technique when I was traipsing all over Greece in ancient, you know, athletic archaeological digs, where I had a host or a reporter following around an archaeologist, and, you know, how do you mic them, and where they're not, mics aren't rustling on their clothes, you know. So I actually brought baseball caps and I clipped the mics onto the baseball caps so they always stay on mic. That's something I learned in theater. So I wasn't ready to do the field recording until I had done theater. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I wasn't ready to do Tiny Desk until I had done the field recording.
I want to tell you my very first experience of field recording. I had never done it before. I went to college for recording arts, and it was all in a studio environment. And I get out of college and I open up a small recording studio in Salt Lake, and lo and behold, I pick up a client that is for the Princess of Norway is coming to visit, and she's doing a thing with the STEM research for the school. She's coming from there to kind of do like a foreign ambassador kind of thing, right? So she's coming to Salt Lake to visit these schools, and the guy that's bringing her wanted me to film it and document a meeting that they were having. And I was supposed to have lapels and have everything kind of mic'd up, ready to go beforehand. I had a field recorder. I had everything kind of all dialed in, and they showed up late. And I didn't have time to get everyone wired up. So I knew they were going to be late. And I show up to the gig, and where they're having the meeting, I just randomly placed lav mics in different locations where I think people were going to be sitting, and I kind of hit them. And I was able to scrap that together, but being a newbie in the field recording thing, I was sweating bullets the whole night. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know what was going to happen, and it all ended up working out fine. But lots of people don't even know that field recording is an option. Lots of people don't even know that Foley work is an option, or that they think audio engineer, they think they're going into a studio to multi-track record 20 channels, and the tech behind Foley and field recording is incredible. And I didn't realize what you could do and how you could capture sounds until I took your class. Now we don't really go in the deep end on the tech stuff here, because it's not really what our show's about. But maybe could you spend, I don't know, a few minutes just talking about ambisonic recording and how you were able to mic the voodoo stuff in Africa?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's this, you may have heard, Apple Music is now releasing everything in Spatial. And it's like, what is Spatial? What does that mean? It basically means that you can kind of create a playback that's very realistic, even with headphones. You don't necessarily need, a home theater system to hear a more sort of enveloping sound. And it's, you always hear these buzzwords, Atmos and, Dolby Digital and all this stuff. But basically, I was recording what I would call quad sound, which is sort of the predecessor for me for Ambisonic. Quad sound entailed recording, basically, I had 4 tent poles and 4 omnidirectional microphones attached to the end of 4 tent poles. And I basically looked like a helicopter walking around. And I was able to record sound from 360 degrees in every direction.
Festival is a family reunion, religious revival, and New Year's celebration rolled into one. The names of the chief deities, Mamakole, Atasakumo, and Atakapesu, are written on whitewashed temples shaded by men.
And at the time, I was recording to 2 DAT recorders, because it was 2004 when I did that story. And then in post-production, I could sync up the 2 stereo recordings, and the only way I could actually play it back, and I was pretty impressed that I could do this then, in Pro Tools Free, which is an audio engineering software that most people use, most professionals use. At the time, they had a plugin from DTS, which is one of the surround sound decoding companies, to actually create a DTS audio experience that you would burn to a DVD. And if you take that DVD and put it in any home theater, you could actually hear back my recordings from West Africa, my quad sound recordings, I'm calling them, the 4 omnidirectional microphones, because I assigned them correctly in the Pro Tools software and mixed it out onto the DVD disc. I can take that DVD and play back surround sound recordings that I had made in West Africa, voodoo rituals and festivals, all kinds of drumming and music that I could play back in any home theater. And I thought that was super cool. Well, nowadays, you can actually encode this stuff for basically Apple's spatial audio codec. And that just means you code and you decode is called a codec. And that's sort of the playback like an MP3 or anything like that. Now they have spatial audio where you can play back this surround stuff. So I've now graduated 20 years later to, I'm actually using an Ambisonic mic from Soyuz to create this new project called Ghostlight Concerts. And that's all about recording musicians in a hall or a venue that you might be very, very far away from. But hey, what does the Sydney Opera House sound like with just a couple of musicians playing around one ambisonic mic at the correct distance so that you can really hear what that room sounds like and marry that with a video. You know, the Ghostlight is the light that they put out on stage after every performance so that, you know, the theater shall never remain dark. You know, that's the sort of superstition. So I'm going to show you the Ambisonic mic that I'm actually recording with to make Ghostlight concerts. I'm speaking into one capsule out of the 4 right now. That's actually how you're hearing my voice. And I'm going to hold it up to the camera.
Yeah. That's crazy how it has 4 different directions. Are you getting 2 stereo pair pretty much in that one mic?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're not like stereo pair like I was recording the Voodoo Rituals in the past with 1 stereo pair here and 1 stereo pair in the back. It's more set up like this, you know, top right, bottom left, top left, bottom right. It's kind of like recording like this, not this, if that makes any kind of sense. So what you need is software that the microphone comes with that you can actually decode that surround sound into a binaural recording, into a 7.1 home theater, and it actually will place everything in the correct place. And you can even move the perspective around. You can pretend to be the mic. You can tilt your head up. You can tilt your head down. You can turn from left to right. And you can automate all of that if you want to. If you wanted to match, let's say, your camera movement around the mic, you could actually automate the sound binaurally to follow the pattern of the camera. So that's kind of like what we're playing with these days in Ambisonic that really will place the listener in a room. And I've always lusted after, you know, oh my gosh, what would it sound like? You know, there's such very famous concert halls all over the world. Let's say the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam supposedly has the best acoustics for classical music in the world. Well, what would it be like to just create an ambisonic recording with like a string quartet on stage? So you just hear that really pure, well-recorded sound in that room.
And your history, you've worked with people like Yo-Yo Ma. Like you could probably text him and be like, "Hey, I'm going to be here. You want to," you know, like people like that. Just having access to that network is probably critical and like amazing to just the people you've met over the years.
That's right. I mean, I certainly don't have Yo-Yo Ma's text, you know, phone number available to text, but
sure
I could probably figure out his publicist and say, hey, I recorded that Tiny Desk. I'd love to do something. What do you think? He's going to be here then. So it helps certainly with the pitching process, but I'm also really interested in, you know, being a music discovery source so that I'm actually out on the hunt for new interesting groups that you never would have heard otherwise. I think that was a huge part of the early days of Tiny Desk. And of course, now every massive famous musician with a humongous band shows up. It's not quite, it doesn't quite fit the original assignment of Tiny Desk. But I'm really interested in, you know, being a music discovery show. In addition to, of course, recording some super talented, famous folks, but that's certainly not my priority.
No, well, and like as you're talking about this, I was just thinking about, so one of my all-time favorite singers is this Danish performer. I'll screw up the pronunciation, but it's like, but we call her Mo. Okay. But it's just M-O with the line through it. And I've talked about her on the show a bunch, so I won't bore people. But anyway, she did a thing with a company called Moment House. And Moment House did sort of a live concert event where you could sort of attend. She was doing like a album release kind of concert in Denmark, but for fans around the world, they did this sort of, you know, live stream thing that was happening around the world at the same time. But having something like this spatial audio or using this sort of ambisonic, you know, capturing equipment would have made that so much more interesting to listen to, I guess, you know? And so like, I mean, the performance was great. It was well shot, all those things. But like the one thing that happens, at least for me as kind of a fan of live music and as a guy who spent a lot of time at a lot of concerts, for me, it's how you feel at the event, right? And so anything you can do to start bridging that gap between sort of being there and not being there, right? And so Tiny Desk did some iteration of this, which is, you're seeing the thing and it's this intimate performance and it's all this kind of thing, right? It tries to give you a little bit of that indication of being there. But now by way of technology like this, I feel like you're going to be able to start to create more impactful experiences where it's not just a YouTube video, but you're there. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I mean, it's a little bit like theoretical or whatever, but this notion of being able to make the performance even more powerful by virtue of you're picking up notes and sounds in the room and things like that you would normally miss in like a well-produced event, right? I mean, part of the most of these concert type experiences, they're trimming out the crowd or they're, filtering it down to just so you can hear the music and stuff. And, but if you were listening to the music in the front of you, but behind you, you had, the crowd murmuring and singing along and all those things that, make being at an event so meaningful. I think, you could really make for a very impactful show or an impactful presentation.
I wish we had audio samples of your voodoo stuff in Africa that we could just play right now, because it quite literally is. There's kids and women playing over here, and there's drums over here, and there's a conversation over here, and you got people cooking dinner over here, and dogs and cats running by, and you literally hear it all, and it's all kind of going by you.
Well, and it's what you're trying to do, right? I mean, like if you think about during COVID and stuff like that, like we moved to Zoom because we were trying to replicate the experience of being in the office together. And we tried to do all these other things, right? And the whole thing is, with a lot of online entertainment and things like that, so much of it is trying to reproduce a feeling or reproduce an environment, that kind of thing. And, maybe through tools like this and the technology of ambisonic recording and other approaches in the future, you do start to get to more of that. I don't know, it sounds dumb, but more like that virtual reality kind of vibe where you're, understanding more fully the environment that you're a part of. You're not just watching something happen. Instead, it's kind of happening to you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I am a huge fan because of my journalism background. I'm much more interested in capturing a moment in time rather than, creating.
I love that.
Perfect version of anything. And I think, creating stuff like that makes you feel like you're a part of something real, and it kind of humanizes everything. So it makes it so that everyone can relate to it. So part of the brilliance of Tiny Desk that my dear friend Bob Boylan created, he created an environment where perfection is not what we're after. It's all about, capturing a moment in time and a vibe. So the ambisonic recording lends itself so beautifully to that concept that I'm so attached to continuing.
One of my favorite recordings that I've ever done, I've worked in studio environments. I've recorded multi-track bands
hot on the guitar here.
All that stuff. But one of my favorite recordings that I ever did was a guy named Casey Connor, just an acoustic guitar player, was playing music for his friend's ceremony for their wedding. And they were set up outside in Lake Chelan on the water. And I had a 57 on his guitar and I had a 58 on his vocals, but just those two mics, I picked up the lake ambience, the kids playing in the background, the boats going by, and just the birds singing, and he's playing at the same time, and just capturing that moment and being able to mix it down and give it to the bride and groom as a present. Like, here you go, here's your buddy playing for an hour beforehand. A, they loved it, and B, it's one of my favorite recordings, and it's literally just two mics.
Yeah, I mean, because there's context.
Those kind of moments are what I do it for.
That you never feel the urge to go away. Never ever go away. Please stay. Well, there will be times I am afraid we'll lie within this bed we've made. Think forever is a very long time. Between now and then, of course, never forget, my heart is yours, just as it beats you are mine. Remember that I am yours and you are mine.
You've done so many shows with the Tiny Desk stuff. It's the same kind of live experience, and you're working with so many different artists. Is there one that, like, stands above the rest to you as like one of your favorite projects you worked on in that series because of something like that?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Not necessarily because of something like that, but I think, yeah, for something like that, the Global Sound concert that I made with a guy called Santax, I haven't published anything yet. I'm still figuring out the order and how much I want to have in releasing, and the how frequent, and if I can get sponsors. But this guy Santax, he was in Valencia, Spain, and we're in the middle of the city, and you hear sirens, you hear the wind, the environment, and there's something very beautiful. I don't shy away from that, as long as that critical distance of, are the vocals and the music louder, a lot louder than the background? Okay, I'm good. I'm not striving to record in a sterile environment. I'm like a fish out of water in a recording studio because I think it's so utterly boring for me. I have so much respect for it. There's so many incredible artists and technicians who make magic happen, but I'm much more interested in the capturing reality enhanced, something that is very realistic but sounds larger than life. And that's really what I'm after.
Ya sé que nos conocimos ayer, que no eres de aquí, solo hablas inglés, but just call me, baby, just call me. Que ahora ya no duermo bien y no sé por qué, pero estoy obsessed, yeah. Just call me, baby, just call me.
We are in Las Artes y las Ciencias, my city, Valencia. And well, my Spanglish is because of Valencia, I mean, here is full of people speaking English, Bulgarian, well, every language. And it's very cosmopolitan.
Plantas de amor y sanación, mi corazón entrego abiertamente a la creación, mi rendición, espíritu antiguo tan presente. Solo hay que confiar para sentir la tierra con su vibración cantar. Qué hermosa es la vida.
Our music is an expression of gratitude, bringing light to everything and expressing all the beauty that nature, that great spirit, Mother Earth.
But in terms of a Tiny Desk concert, there's one performance by Monsieur Pyrénées. They're a band from Bogota. I had very limited channels. I think I had 16 channels at the time, and they were a full, huge band. They had 2 drummers, three horn players, 2 electric guitarists, a whole bunch of percussion, a double bass player, and 3 singers. And I had very limited channels. So I remember directing the 3 lead singers, and the 2 guys playing guitar kind of sang some backup harmony, but I needed them all to share the one stereo shotgun mic. So I would direct them, hey, you guys need to lean in super close to the lead singer, and your heads need to be 1, 2, 3, right together, singing into the mic. Your harmony is too low. Your harmony is too loud. So I'm literally telling them how to perform.
That's so cool. It's like I've done this with bluegrass bands, because you'll get like the banjo player will step towards the mic and do a solo while the lead singer backs up, and then the fiddle will come on. And it's the same kind of thing. They have this, they always kind of sit right in front of this little blue round mic. I can't remember the model of it.
Yeah, the ear trumpet
always
labs.
use, but I've done a couple of, yes. But I don't know. It's, I'm nerding out with you, Ryan. I'm sure you have a question you want to ask.
No, I have a couple of things. Well, one I was going to ask, just kind of on that topic of, impactful experiences in the Tiny Desk realm. One of my all-time favorites is an older one that I think you were a part of, which was Paramore. And I was just curious. So Mike and I were involved in a group that put on a Paramore concert in Pocatello, Idaho, a million years ago. And that show was maybe one of the most impactful shows I've ever seen, because I was so blown away by Hayley Williams' ability to sing. There's lots of great singers out there and stuff, but man, for that little tiny package, being able to just belt the way she does. It just blows me away. So I was just curious, if you had any thoughts or memories of a show maybe like that, maybe that show in particular, maybe we can bond over Hayley Williams for a minute.
Yes, oh my gosh. I absolutely loved that Tiny Desk as well. And they really prepared for the stripped down vibe. I think they all had tiny little amps that they brought, but I still recorded everything direct so I could make it sound really big. The drummer didn't bring a drum kit. He had like a little drum pad, and they really got the assignment. They were kind of sitting in a little half circle, and she still sounded phenomenal and belted everything. And it was a wonderful time working with them. And the one anecdote I could say from that is that, they had a concert. They're like, you got to come to our show tonight. And it was at a place that was not accessible by metro, and it was kind of a long Uber ride, and I was exhausted because what I like to do is right after I record the band, I strike everything, then I take the recording home, and then I literally stay up for hours doing a rough mix the same day. Otherwise I get too distant from it, and I'm also recording 3 of these a week, so I need to keep up with everything. And I hate taking notes. So I didn't go to the show, and I regret it so much because I've never seen Paramore live.
That's so like their Riot album had just come out when we did the show, so they were new and upcoming and like just on the peak, and Jimmy Eat World was the headliner, and that I had never seen Paramore play before. I'd seen Jimmy Eat World a few times, and I think they kind of stole the show, to be honest with you.
I'm not surprised.
They were full energy. The guitar player was doing backflips, and it was just like really cool to see.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, like both Mike and I have spent a long time around music and stuff like that. And I mean, there's a million singers that I just love, but that experience and that event and just like listening to her sing, and she also comes in such a tiny little package that it's just like, how is she even able to generate that much energy, And so for me, I mean, that's been one of my more impactful concerts maybe ever.
You talked about Paramore having to strip down a little bit, and that's kind of the case with most of the Tiny Desk series. Is you get these artists that are used to doing these big rock shows, and now you're putting them in a library and saying, hey, strip it down, do acoustic, and it kind of puts them out of their element, in the forefront, and being very almost like being naked in the locker room, like, here, let's strip away all your stuff and make you kind of perform and be in the moment. You don't have to mention any names or anything like that, but were there issues in shows in the past where it was too intimate and they had a hard time actually doing the task at hand because they're stripping down so much and it made it hard, and then you as a producer having to deal with that and work around it?
Yeah. Well, I'll mention some that were unbelievably successful, but when you're in the room recording them, you're kind of like, how is this going to happen? How are we going to pull this off? One band from England called Wolf Alice, they're a super loud thrasher, like heavy rock band with super loud songs, and they completely did something unique that they had never done before. They completely stripped down their songs into these beautiful acoustic melodies, and they were so shy. The lead singer, when I saw her on stage, she's like running around and screaming. She's intense, and she was so shy. I could barely even get a sentence out of her, and it was just like a complete different experience, which is what I love about my recordings that I make. Is I'm not trying to recreate their album or their sound. I'm trying to create something completely new for their fans who can hear them in a way that they've never heard them before, and they can show off and flex another muscle that they have as artists. The same thing happened with Idols. Idols is a super loud rock band from Ireland? I can't even remember, someplace in the UK.
Wow. That'd be cool.
Incredible, loud, visceral, amazing band. The lead singer, Joe, came in and he said, how the fuck are we supposed to do this? This is impossible. We usually have a huge PA, a crowd that's going crazy and doing, moshing, and there's just no way we're going to be able to pull this off. And it's all right, listen, guys, just do me a favor and give it a try. I'm going to, direct you guys. When Joe has the verse, the whole band kind of has to play a little quieter. We'll treat your drums and stuff. But when everyone's loud and rambunctious, everything can come up. So you have to think about playing a little more dynamically than you might be used to with in-ear monitors and all the stuff that you have at your fingertips when you have all the technology. But the whole thing was just about having fun. And the concert, I encourage you to go check it out. Idols, IDELS. Joe has so much energy, and he's screaming into the mic, and he turns totally beet red, and it's just incredible to see his whole band. They're all dressed up, they're all dancing around. And at one point, they actually drag in members of the audience, which was very small. There may have been 20 people in the room, but they're dragging people in from the audience and dancing with them, and it's just such a surreal moment. And it's one of my favorite Tiny Desk concerts because no one's ever captured that band like that, ever. And they were so thrilled when it came out.
Were you part of the Gore show that just happened?
Yes. That was a treat. That was
Can you talk
so
about
much
that?
fun.
That had to be amazing.
I was like, how are we going to cut like the 6 penises that he's wearing on the front of his outfit? How are we going to actually have that on a YouTube video that kids might see? No, they were so much fun. They were totally professionals, and it was just a blast. I actually had the most fun wandering. I had the idea like, hey, let's shoot B-roll of them checking in at security in full costume and walking around the office and inviting NPR people to their concert. And it was
That's
so
cool.
surreal to just have them walking around the NPR newsroom in full costume. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Well, one thing I wanted to try and get in with you, this show is, as much as we love music, a lot of times on this show, we're talking to CEOs and startup founders and people like this. And, you've obviously run this spectrum of careers that have gone to, everything from freelance to fully corporate to now kind of entering a world on your own. How are you feeling about just sort of getting established as a business person, as somebody who's, developing his own organization, who's, and obviously you've done aspects of this already, but if this is going to be your income going forward, what's changing for you in terms of, the way that you've always done things as a technician, and now you're moving into the guy who's taking your technician and turning it into, a company, so to speak.
Yeah, it's unbelievably rewarding. I've spent 25 years going from job to job. I was at NPR for 5 years, then I transferred to NPR West for 2 years, then I was at NPR New York for 3 years, then I got laid off in 2009 during the Great Recession. I went straight to Marketplace in Los Angeles for 2 years, then I was at WNYC Studio 360 for 2 years, and then immediately went to Ask Me Another for 3 years, and then Tiny Desk for 9. Like, I've always jumped from one thing to another because I get bored easily. And if I can't be creative, then I go. As soon as they're like, yeah, stay in your lane, you're the audio engineer, we don't really need any ideas from you, then I'm out. So Tiny Desk definitely had me the longest because working with my colleague Bob Boylan, he's just an incredibly creative force. He came up with All Songs Considered because he would play music between the radio stories on All Things Considered, and he would get tons of mail. And this was probably 2002, long before podcasts ever existed. He created a music show for the internet, a music show for your computer, which is really what podcasting is. And he was well ahead of his time. Yeah. And then he went on to create Tiny Desk concerts because he couldn't hear an artist at South by Southwest because it was during March Madness and everyone was cheering for the game. So Tiny Desk was created out of necessity. Now what I'm doing,
wasn't it
finally? Yeah.
With that show that you're that show that, sorry to interrupt, because that's an interesting show, and it's the start of the Tiny Desk series. Was they literally, like, he was bummed that he couldn't hear, and after the show he said, hey, let's go back to my office and we'll track it. And that's the birth of Tiny Desk, right?
Literally, it was a joke. Stephen Thompson, who also works at NPR Music, he said as a joke to Laura Gibson, the artist, he said, Well, it sounds like you're pretty good, but we couldn't hear a fucking thing because everyone was cheering from the March Madness game. And he said, so as a joke, why don't you come to DC the next time you're in DC? Why don't you come to our office and you can just play at Bob's desk? Completely a joke. Then Laura Gibson called his bluff. She said, hey, I'm coming to DC. Get your desk ready. And they said, I guess we'll pull out a couple of cameras and record this. And that was the birth. It was literally a fluke.
That's so cool.
Becoming an entrepreneur for myself for the first time after going job to job to job and finally, having the guts to say, you know what? I don't need to work for anyone else right now. I want to pursue something that's super important to me and to create something new. In addition to Tiny Desk, I want to make something that really resonates with people. And I love travel. I love talking to people as a journalist. So I thought, and I love music. So I thought, what could be better than global sound concerts, traveling the world, finding musicians where they're from to learn about that place, and Ghostlight concerts, finding venues and sticking unique musicians in them to hear what that place sounds like. So in terms of trying to actually monetize it and pay some bills, I have no idea. I just started a Patreon account today. Feel like I'm finally ready to start a Patreon account. Will it work? Probably not, but it's something. I'm hoping that, all this outreach that I'm doing, I'm actually going to Chile, December, at the basically end of December into January. I'm spending the holidays with my girlfriend in Chile. So I've partnered up with someone there who created a social media post that went completely viral saying that, hey, Josh Rogosin, he's coming to Chile. He needs to find talent for these 2 new shows he's producing. So enter this contest. So I had the idea to create a contest, and all of this buzz is happening in Chile now, where all these artists are being inspired to create these 1-minute, basically audition videos that I'll go through. I'm going to host a concert at a brewery in Chile that'll have the 3 finalists. There's going to be special beers. One's called Ghostlight. One's called Global Sound with a QR code on it that'll go to maybe my Patreon page. I don't know. And of course, we're going to get corporate sponsors and that kind of thing to have a live event. But eventually, I'm hoping I'll get some sponsors for the shows themselves on YouTube, and also perhaps a distributing deal, with any number of companies, whether it's Apple TV, Apple Music, Netflix. I mean, it's a video show too. The History Channel, the Travel Channel. I would love to team up with any of these folks who just want really interesting, compelling content. And it's all a huge leap of faith. And luckily I've paid my dues. I've spent 25 years going from job to job to job. And it's kind of like a now or never. If I don't do it now, I never will. I could stay at the Tiny Desk for another 10 years, but what will that accomplish? More of the same for me. I want to make something new.
Well, I'm glad you left Tiny Desk because when you were there, they made us sign a whole email thing just to get you permission to come on the show, and now it's just hit you up and say, hey, come on over.
It's a wonderfully liberating experience to be a free agent.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, not having when I worked at a radio station, I've done that multiple times over my career, and just having corporate over your head is kind of it's a different experience, that's for sure. But well, Ryan had to dip. It's about that time anyways. Josh, you want to tell people where they can reach out, maybe find your Patreon, if they have an artist they want to recommend to you, or an idea for your global concert series? What's a good way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram. It's at Josh Rogosin, at Global Sound Concerts, at Ghostlight Concerts. On Patreon, it's Josh Rogosin, and that's spelled JoshRogosin. I'm also have a YouTube channel, which is /Global Sound Concerts, and all my content's going to be there. I have a Twitter handle at Josh Rogosin. So I'm out there. Please find me and my DMs are open. This is an entire new experience, and it's sort of the possibilities are just endless.
Love it. Well, thanks again for making time for us today, Josh. I could talk with you for another 2 hours probably and not get bored, but I think our listeners might.
That's fair.
Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that tuned in today and every week. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ryan.
Dejo que me recuerde mi canto. Que siempre camino en suelo sagrado. Que soy hijo del misterio que me ha dado este regalo.
I love having this experience of performing my music for a yoga class, watching all these amazing bodies move. Thank you.